Hi, my name is Tina, and today I'm going to show you a few different ways of weaving in the ends. And I can tell you that there are some official ways of weaving in the ends and however you want to do them. In my personal opinion, there's no wrong way to weave in your ends, just like there's no wrong way to knit. If you like the way the finished product looks, then that's all that matters. However, I will tell you that there are no knots in knitting. So you never want to knot the two ends together because those knots will not last over time. You always want to just leave a tail and then weave it in afterwards. So I'm going to show you two ways that I do it in stockinette. This is stockinette here, and then also the same two ways, but just so you can see how it looks in garter stitch as well. And I decide how I'm going to weave in my ends pretty much based on my mood. It just depends on, you know, what project I'm working on and how concerned I am with how the ends being woven look, and just basically how patient I am, or I guess, I don't know. I just weave in my ends differently just about every time. So I'm going to show you the first way, which I believe is probably the most correct way, but I don't always do it. It just depends on my mood, like I said. So first of all, here's where you can see the hole where the two ends meet. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow the line of the stitches, and you're going to start by sticking your needle in where the other yarn came out. So you're going to put it in there like that. And sometimes I will just follow this stitch around. Other times I will make it go back the way it came. I think that leaves a little bit more bulk that way, so typically I will just follow the stitch. And what you're going to do is you're just going to follow the stitches as if you were doing like a duplicate stitch. So you'll look to see where this yarn went, and you go up into that stitch there, and then you'll follow it around, and then you're going to come down through this one, and then down through this one. And then you'll follow it around. You see the stitch here that comes around. Actually, I probably should have done two different colors, but I didn't think about that. And then you follow it around, and then you follow it around. You're just doing a duplicate stitch here, and you're just following your stitches. Okay, and then you see where it's going. It's coming around and going back up. And this lays very nicely on the back side. In most cases, you can't even notice that there is duplicate stitching here. And on the front, it looks the same because those stitches lay flat against the back of those other stitches. And you just keep going. I always recommend that you weave in at least an inch on fingering or lightweight yarn, but preferably 2 inches for each direction. And then you're going to come back down, and then you just go as far as you want. And then you always have to do it with the other side as well. So we're going to come here because this is where the other one came out, and you're going to come up and just tug gently on that yarn. You don't want to make it too snug. Doing weaving in the ends on stockinette is, I think, the easiest way. Again, you're just going to follow it around, see where that yarn is going, and then you're going to follow it up. And if you have trouble figuring out where your stitches are going, if you pull your fabric apart a little bit, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. I've just gotten to learn how the stitches work. So you follow it around, you're going to come up and go through. Just like that. And then trimming the ends, you're just going to trim it, leaving a little bit out. So don't trim it right up next to the fabric, because as the fabric stretches, that end could pop forward. And trim the other one. So that's the first way that I like to weave in my ends. And from the front, you can really barely see. And if you block it afterwards, it does look, you can see a little bit of a pucker there, but if you block it after you weave in your ends, and even if I move it around a bit, you can't really see it. Okay, so the second way that I sometimes weave in my ends is pretty much if I'm kind of lazy, or if it's a stitch pattern that is difficult to follow. Sometimes different stitch patterns are hard to follow through, but you can do it this way. So you're still going to take your yarn in where the other yarn has come out, because you need to close up that hole. Okay? And then I will sometimes just weave it straight up. Like I'll put my yarn in here. I'll skip this one here, this purl stitch here, or it's not really a purl stitch, and I'll skip it and I'll go up like this and go up at an angle. So you're skipping the one directly next to it and going up to the next row. So you kind of have a diagonal effect going on like that. And again, you can't really see that from the front, but sometimes if your fabric is a little looser, you will be able to see that more than you'll be able to see this one down here. And then sometimes I will also do it straight across the line. So again, you're going to follow your stitch around from where it was and put it in that to close that gap. And then sometimes I will just go back and forth like this, doing the same thing as going up at an angle, but just following the row. So I came up here, instead of going down in the stitch directly next to it, I'm going to go down here. So it's always on that same row that comes across. Just like that. And again, it just depends on my mood and how lazy I want to be. So there you've got straight across, this is up at an angle, and this is woven in as like a duplicate stitch. And if you look at the front, it pretty much looks like you don't know where those ends are. And I'm going to show you the same thing with garter stitch. Garter stitch is a little bit different, only because of how it looks from this side. You have to really pay attention to where your stitches are going. So this yarn comes out here, and it comes up, goes under here, and then down and into this loop, and then up, and then under these two. So again, we're going to start by putting go into the stitch where the other one came out, and we're going to follow it up. So we see that it comes up here, it goes under these two, and then it comes down into that one. And then it comes up, and then it goes under these two, and then it comes down. And again, this is just duplicate stitch. Comes around and up, and then it comes up and under these two. And I'm not really pulling that too tight. Again, around and up and under those. And again, you're going to want to weave it in a good distance. I'll go ahead and do this side the same way with a duplicate stitch. You're going to come around and up there. And what you want to be sure of is that you're following this row. You don't want to accidentally come up into this row. Now, if you do that, that's okay, as long as you just continue to follow that row across. But you want to make sure that you're following the right yarn. So we're going to come through here, and then down back there, and then follow it around, Garter stitch is a little bit harder because you have more steps. And then through. And then back down where you came from. And then around. And back through. Just like that. Sorry, I bumped the camera. And again, even on the wrong side, it's very difficult to see where those duplicate stitches are. And on the right side, almost non-existent. And the same thing goes with garter stitch and going up at an angle or off down to the side. Although you're going to see it more on a garter stitch. When you're doing garter stitch and it's going to be for a blanket or something, I highly recommend the duplicate stitch because you can almost not see that stitch at all. And if I had pulled those stitches a little bit tighter, you really wouldn't be able to see it. But you're always going to start by going into that stitch where the other yarn is coming out because you have to close that gap. If you started, oops, hang on. I just went through the wrong hole. I was trying to show you that gap again. Okay, so here's your gap. You actually have a hole there because those two stitches are pulling apart. Now if you started going this way with this yarn, that hole would stay there. So you want to make sure that you are closing that gap. So again, you're going to come in where the yarn is going out. That's your first step with every method. And then if you're going to go up at an angle, you're going to come up here and then go up to here. You see I'm on the second row down, and then you're going to come up to here and up to here. So it's coming up at an angle as you come up. And then you just pull it. And again, if you're going to do this method, you're going to want to go a further distance away because if it pulls, if you only go an inch away, and it happens to pull out, you're done for. And also the heavier weight the yarn, the further you want to go because the stitches aren't as big. So a lighter weight, like a fingering weight, you could probably get away with an inch, but with a worsted like this is, you probably want to go at least 2 inches. So again, when we start this side, we're going to come over and around. We're going to come in there. And same thing, this looks very similar to what we had down here. We're just going to go weave it back and forth across the same row. And again, you will be able to see the diagonal and the same row weaving in a little bit more than you will with the duplicate stitch, but on the front, you can't really tell. So those are the ways that I weave in my ends. Now, when I do an end that is on this is a cast on edge. Again, it just depends on my mood. Sometimes I will try and follow the stitches, but most of the time, as long as the end, you can't tell where the end is, that's all that really matters. So sometimes, let me see if I don't want to go in the wrong spot and then take out a stitch. So just find a place where you can start where you're not going to undo your stitches. And then sometimes I will just go back and forth along this edge like this. Because nobody is going to be looking that closely at your ends being woven in. You just want to make the garment look polished, and you don't want people to be seeing a lot of ends. So I will just weave it across like that. Sometimes I will, actually I'll show you the other way I do it on the cast off edge because it's a little easier to see. So you can't really see that. If I trim this edge or trim this yarn and then let it pop back in, actually I trimmed it a little bit too much and it popped too far. Let's try again. And let it pop back to the back. It's fine. And sometimes I will go up to the second row and weave it in just so that I don't have a little edge like that popping out at the bottom of my sweater. So let's look at the top now. This is where the cast off edge is. And you will see that it looks like this is just a regular cast off, and it looks like a chain. And so what I will do here is I will sometimes run my stitch underneath the chain on each one like this. So I'm going through under both loops of the chain and then just weaving back and forth. Now again, I don't know if these are the official way to do it. Now if you're doing like a master knitters class or something where you're going to be graded on your ends being woven, I highly recommend that you research weaving in the ends a little bit more. These are just ways that I like to weave my ends in, and you don't see them, so that is the main thing. So, and that's how I will weave them in at the top of, say, a sock or anything else that is cast on like that. And again, I could trim that down a little bit more, but I think it'll pop back in there. So there you go. That's how I weave my ends in, and I hope this tutorial helps you figure out how you're going to weave your ends in. Again, this is the back side, so you can see a little bit of thickness here where I did the duplicate stitch. You can see here where I've gone up at an angle, and you can see a little bit here where I have gone across the row. And again, here is where the duplicate stitch is, but you can't really see it all that well. Here is across the row, and here is up diagonal. And if I flip it over, right here, coming down this way is where the diagonal is, and then right about here is where it's coming across the row, and right here, this row here is where I have duplicate stitch. And if you look real close, you can see the two stitches. There's one here, and then there's the second one behind it. But again, it doesn't really show up that much. And then let's look down here. This is where we're coming up at an angle about right there, and right here is where we're coming across the row, and then right down here is where we have the duplicate stitch. So again, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it will help you do your weaving in of the ends. So thanks so much for watching. Bye.